In most beginning English classes, you learn about verbs mostly in terms of tense. Present tense verbs take place now, past tense verbs took place in the past, and future tense verbs will take place sometime in the future. Everything else is accomplished with a bunch of helping verbs or adverbial phrases, and that seems kind of inconsistent since the future tense is formed with will, and that's a helping verb, right? The truth is that English really only has two proper tenses, plus a bunch of periphrases, and two participle forms. This got complicated. Let me explain. Hello and welcome. I'm Zilla, and this is my Athenaeum. Today I want to talk about verbs. Grammatically speaking, all English verbs, in fact all Indo-European verbs, can be described in 5 major characteristics: person, number, tense, mood, and voice. Person refers to the speaker's relationship to the subject of the sentence. So in first person, the subject is I or we, inclusive of the speaker. In second person, it's addressed to someone, you. In third person, it's talking about someone else. He, she, it, they, sie, etc. Number refers to how many subjects there are. We have singular and plural. Singular is just one, just I or that book. And plural is more than one. We or these books. Some Indo-European languages also have a dual number for when there are exactly 2. Sanskrit has this, for example, but that usage is pretty uncommon. Tense describes when a verb takes place. So present means now, and past means before, and future means later. But, as I mentioned before, English really only has 2 grammatical tenses. What I mean by that is that there are only 2 forms of just the verb that mark tenses. So, for instance, you can say in the present, I walk, or in the past, I walked. And that ed at the end is our past tense marker. But there is no single word to say I will walk. Future requires a helping verb. Those sort of verbal phrases with additional words required are known as periphrasis, or periphrastic tense. In fact, in English there's only one other form of the root verb that is used by itself, and that's the third-person singular present. I walk, she walks. A verb's mood reflects how definite it is. Most verbs wind up in the indicative. They definitely happen. So, she walks. But you can also have things in the subjunctive mood, which is more hypothetical. She might walk, if she walked. And there's also the imperative, or command mood. Walk. And, well, most English textbooks don't list the infinitive, or to walk, as a mood, but you will find it listed that way when you're learning some other languages. Some Indo-European languages also have other moods, like the optative, which is a more specific kind of hypothetical, where subjunctive in those languages is used for if this happened, then that. An optative would be used for a wish or a hope. So, subjunctive could be if she walks, and optative might be I hope she walks. Finally, we have voice. Voice tells us whether the subject of the sentence is doing the action of the verb, or whether the action of the verb is happening to the subject. So, in the active voice, we might have I followed my favorite YouTuber on Twitter this weekend. And in the passive sense, you might have, I was followed by 10 new people. You'll notice that when a verb is passive, it sometimes has an agent, or the person or thing doing the action of the verb, set aside in a prepositional phrase with by. Since many English readers tend to find the passive voice rather weak, especially in persuasive or argumentative writing, many teachers will teach their students to avoid using it. One method that I've taught for students to recognize when they switch into passive voice is to add the phrase by zombies and see if zombies become the agent. For instance, let's say you have a sentence, the dog walked. If you tack the phrase by zombies onto the end, well, you get the dog walked by zombies. The dog is still doing the walking, it's just passing some zombies on its way. But if you have the sentence, the dog was walked, well, the dog was walked by zombies makes those zombies into the agent. The zombies are walking the dog. That's the passive voice. Some languages also have a middle voice, like in ancient Greek, where you might say that a subject is acting upon or for the benefit of themselves. But just like the dual, this doesn't show up a lot. So those are the 5 major variables that define Indo-European verb forms. But something still seems to be missing. After all, if I say I walk, that's first person singular present indicative active. But if I say I am walking, that's also first person singular present indicative active. How come there are multiple forms for that set, and where did that ing form come from? That ing ending is actually a participle, or a noun formed from a verb. In English, we have 2 participle forms, one for each of our grammatically formed tenses. Ing is characteristic of the present participle, whereas the past participle usually ends in ed or n. As you might guess, other languages with more complete tense structures might have many more participial forms. In English, those participles are used to form more complex periphrases with even more nuanced meaning. They're especially useful for getting at aspect. Aspect is what I call our 6th verbal variable, and it makes a good complement to tense. Tense, of course, tells us when a verb takes place, but aspect tells us for what duration. The most commonly taught aspects are simple, progressive, and perfective. Simple aspect is your baseline, I teach, they walked, you will go. It generally refers to something that happened once. Progressive, also sometimes known as imperfective, refers to an action taking place over a period of time. Whether that is minutes, hours, days, weeks, doesn't really matter as long as it's over a time frame. So, I am walking, you were going, they will be eating. Perfective, also known as stative or sometimes preteritive, describes something that is in a state of completion at the time when the verb takes place. So, I have eaten, you had gone, they will have finished. You may have noticed that these aspects can apply to any person, number, or tense, and they can also be applied to any mood or voice as well. So I can perfectly well say something like, if my videos were to get popular, I hope I would have said something meaningful. But there are other aspects hiding in little pockets of semantic variation. For instance, let's take the sentence, I teach. Does that mean I am currently teaching? Or does that mean I teach for a living? If it's the latter, then that's not just something that happens once, that's something that happens repeatedly, habitually. This is known as habitual. And in standard American English, we have to use a lot of different specific workarounds, prepositional phrases, and adverbs like always. But in some other dialects and languages, there are more elegant ways of doing it, like AAVE's habitual be. There's also an aspect known as the aorist, which is the Greek name for it. It's a little bit rarer than habitual, and in fact in English we would rarely distinguish this sense. But the idea is that it is something that happened and then was done, or happened just once specifically. It's a little bit sharper than a simple aspect. So in English you might do this with tone or expression, or maybe some extra phrases to indicate the thing being over, like, "Oh, I went to that restaurant," and then never went back. Verbs can be incredibly flexible and specific. The range of expression possible with all of these variables and periphrases and nuances, it's frankly beautiful and deeply necessary. Keep learning, friends.